Welcome to the Fleet Success Show. We are a podcast dedicated to talking about the fundamentals, standards, and best practices that empower today's fleets to achieve fleet success. Let's get into the show.
All right, welcome back for another episode of the Fleet Success Show. I'm your host, Josh Turley, joined by my co-host, Jeff Jenkins.
Happy Tuesday.
Here we are, right? So today we're going to talk about a topic that's been in the news recently. It's this element of quiet quitting.
It's such a weird phrase, quiet quitting.
Quiet quitting. It's like we're going to quit, but we're going to not talk about it quietly.
Quitting.
I guess in some terms, right, it's the passive-aggressive form of today's society. We don't really want to quit, but we're just not going to work anymore.
I wonder how much of this is reflective of, you hear of the people that get fired through text message or a video or
Loom, right? Yeah. No, it probably is all related, right? There's people not having courage.
Yeah.
You know, leaders not having courage to terminate somebody in person or to have a face-to-face conversation. And I get it. 2,500 people at one time, like, there's not an easy way to do that logistically. But, you know, like that crying CEO who had to fire 3 or 4 people, right? And then made it all about him.
Yeah.
I think it's just it's an indication of where we're at as a society right now.
No one wants to do the hard thing.
No. And quiet quitting is just it's the other side of that coin, right? Nobody really wants to quit because then they'd have to go find another job, and it's a pain in the butt to go find another job. So instead we do this whole doing just enough not to get fired, but emotionally you're just totally checked out.
Have you ever quiet quit?
No.
It doesn't have to be work. I guess it could be on anything, right?
Yeah, I'm trying to think like if I've ever quiet quit, like a volunteer work or like a church assignment. I just don't think I have that bone. Like if I'm not happy, I'm just going to quit. I quit my first job.
Yeah.
But then no, ever since then it's all been RTA, so I feel like I'm still here.
You actually stepped it up a notch.
Right, like okay,
I'm going to buy the company.
Yeah, let's just kick this into another gear.
I don't think I've ever done it either. I think that maybe after I've given a notice somewhere.
Oh, for sure, right?
Maybe
you're
then
you're already checked out.
Yeah, you're checked out, and I think that may do it. And it's not necessarily doing just enough to get by. It's probably you're just not there anymore.
Yeah.
But I'm like you, I couldn't live that way. I'd be miserable.
Yeah. Right, like if I was just doing it for a paycheck, like there's way better things to do to get a paycheck.
Yeah.
And so like this idea of doing just enough to get by, we have a saying here that we say all the time, right? If your soul's left a building, your body should follow.
Right.
And maybe it's just perspective, but like you and I both know, like life's just too short. And if you're going to sit there and just waste it and basically trade your minutes away for a paycheck and no real job satisfaction, you are selling yourself so short on life.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think that's the saddest thing about this.
Well, and this isn't anything new.
No.
First of all, this has been happening forever. We're just now coining it as the phrase quiet quitting. I think it's probably more prevalent now. But as I look back, there's a lot of times I've noticed people that have done just enough to get by and to not get fired.
Yeah. Because for them, it's more about the job security, right? For them, it's more about, you asked me in one of the more recent episodes about loyalty. And for them, that's really what it's more about, right? Like I need my health benefits. I want my 401k. There's a little bit of an entitlement there. Like, well, I deserve just to, make this and not have to do anything else. But it definitely is a mentality.
Yeah.
It's a mentality of like, I'm totally fine being mediocre and not being more than I totally could be or living up to my potential.
Right. So, it's those people that you walk around and you come up behind them and they're playing Candy Crush on their phone.
Right.
While they're at work.
Right.
Or what's that phrase? The boss makes $1, I make a dime. That's why I crap on the company time.
That's why I've heard that one. Yeah.
Like there's those sort of things that people have that mentality because you're right. They just want, and a lot of it is benefits as opposed to pay.
Yes.
Because if it was all pay based, you'd be busting your ass to try and make more and more money.
Right. And I think it's interesting, the things I've been reading on quiet quitting and the hot takes that people are having on it is if you don't want your employees to quiet quit, then you should pay them what they're worth. And I'm like, well, that's what we're getting from this.
That's
right?
the antithesis of what should happen.
Yeah. I mean, like, so we're going to just pay you more money to do the job we're already paying you for? Hold on a second. I'm just trying to make sure I understand your argument here. And if you feel like we're underpaying you, then why don't you go get another job, a better job that pays better somewhere else?
That's personal responsibility. It's weird, right?
It's a weird
odd.
concept. I know.
It's very weird. That's always my argument when people talk about things like this.
Right.
Is like, well, they deserve to make more, or minimum wage. We need to raise minimum wage to X or to whatever. And I'm like, well, if you're not happy, why don't you just go get a new job?
Right. Go get that thing that you need or that you want, right? It doesn't seem like, but instead it's everybody else has to change,
Yes.
and there's the personal responsibility. It's, like they blame the evil corporations and things like that, but like 98% of America is employed by small employers. And so that's totally a random stat that I just made up out of nowhere, but I know it's big.
It was really good though. I was impressed.
I was confident, right?
Yeah, you were. I believed you.
I knew somebody was going to be like 98%. That's not right. They're going to fact check me on the podcast. I'm going to get like a Snopes email. This is a Pinocchio. You get 5 Pinocchios on that one.
There you go.
I do know it's a big number though. And like when you quiet quit, you're not hurting the big corporate giants. You're usually hurting the local economy.
Yeah.
And you're hurting yourself, and you're hurting, if you've got a family, you're hurting them because you're coming home miserable because all you're doing is the paycheck.
Well, yeah. And like, what a unfulfilling life.
Right.
Like I don't think I've ever really said, hey, I love what I do as far as a job, but I've been good at it. But I've had a goal that I've worked towards, right? There's
Right.
been ambition and those sort of things. So there's been purpose behind it.
And I think that's the key, right? Patrick Lencioni had the book, The 3 Signs of Job Misery, and basically broke it down to 3 things that lead to employees checking out, right? A lack of employee engagement. The first one was irrelevance. Like their job didn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't know what it was there for. They didn't know why they were there. They didn't have purpose. And so, as you're trying to help employees stay engaged, like you got to make sure they have a purpose. They have a motivation. We talk about dream management and understanding what they're looking for, what their goal is, what they're trying to achieve, and how do those align with the company goals.
Right.
But they have to believe like what the work that they're doing matters, that it has an impact on other people besides themselves, and that it's something that they get something out of, right? And that's that irrelevance. Like eliminating irrelevance is one of the signs of job misery, right?
Yeah.
Getting rid of that. The other one was anonymity. Like you have to be seen. You have to like feel like people care about you at the place you work.
Yeah.
If you're invisible, then you're like, well, I could totally quiet quit and nobody would even notice.
There's a story, gosh, it's probably like 5-6 years ago, where there was a guy in New York who hadn't shown up to work in 6 years. He was making over $200,000 a year.
No way.
Yeah. Hadn't shown up in years to work for that reason, because he had complete and total anonymity. No one knew when he was there, when he wasn't there. And so he just stopped showing up to work and getting paid.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. And they found out how many years he'd been doing it. Like, wow.
Right. Impressive, right?
Yeah.
And at some point, like as a company, you're like, you feel a little bit defrauded.
Oh, yeah.
At the same time, you don't have anybody else to blame but yourself. And that's the third sign of job misery is immeasurement. Like you
Right.
just don't know the score. Like you have no idea to know, like, am I doing well? Am I doing good? And, like, how do I know if I'm winning? But if you've got somebody that's just not showing up to work and yet they're still getting paid, I'd say you probably have a measurement problem first and foremost, right? And then you definitely have an anonymity problem where how does that even happen?
Well, yeah.
Because that guy had a manager.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody was signing the checks. He was in somebody's budget. Just disappeared.
Maybe they just checked in via text.
Man. Clearly,
I'm going good.
And you asked that question, like, have you ever done that? I don't know that I could even do that. As much fun as that sounds like, hey, I can collect $200,000 a year and live anywhere I want and not have any responsibility. That sounds amazing. But I think after a while, it's, and I see this too with people who retire too early. They lose that sense of purpose and they're like, well, I don't know what my life means anymore. And they got to go find something else to do.
When a lot of them end up passing away sooner than they would, because they don't have that purpose. You hear about people retiring and then 6 months later, a year later, they're gone. And it's like, wow.
Right. Like, were they really that unhealthy? Like,
Yeah.
they worked until they died? No, it was the other way around. They died because they didn't work. it's kind of interesting how that paradigm shifts a little bit.
Yeah. One of the things I think that is making this more prevalent right now is the remote aspect.
Yeah.
It's much easier remotely to quiet quit, to do just enough, I think, than it is if you're actually with other people.
Yeah.
Because they're not observing what's going on and what you're doing. You don't have that interaction.
Yep. And there's a bunch of sociologists that figured that out pretty quick too, right? As your behavior changes if you're being observed, right? And I don't remember what they called it. It's not Stockholm syndrome. It's Stockholm paradox maybe, but it's this paradox of like the behavior of people when they're being observed changes.
Yes.
If they think it is, right? And there's like a bias that we have inside of ourselves. And so if you're around other people, like those other people influence how you're acting and behaving. And if you need to look busy and do stuff like that, whereas if you're working remote, you don't have that same level of peer pressure, right? Like this whole sociological element just goes away. And there's nothing to backfill that other than self-discipline, which, as a human species, I'd say that we struggle with. So it's really interesting to see how, like, as a society, how that shift is going to impact us long-term.
Oh, yeah. It's funny. When I took over as CEO in Texas, the guy I took over for, he was like spot on every day. 4:30, he'd leave regardless.
Yeah.
People would wait till he left, and then right after his car drove out, they'd take off. So when I took over for him, right, it was the same thing. They would wait for me to leave.
And then you just never left.
And you know me, I don't leave, right? And then I wouldn't leave. And so people would just stick around, and it'd be like 5:15. And finally they start to trickle out. But you would have those people that the moment you left, they would start packing up and leaving too.
Right? They're like, okay, now it's
for
time
that
to go.
observation, right? It's they want to be observed, and they're like, oh, I'm dedicated. Once the boss leaves, I can go.
Right. Yeah. So it's interesting as you look at that. Well, and then you've got the whole mouse jiggler app thing.
Oh, geez. Yeah.
Right. Which is another issue. And I think in measurement is a whole thing here too, where you're paying attention to, is somebody on Teams or whatever, do they show that they're available, or are they away and idle?
Right. Yeah.
Right. And so, like, because people, they step away from their desk, they go get their coffee, they go crap on the company time, whatever. But the idea is that you've got this little jiggler app that moves your mouse and it keeps you at your keyboard. I've even seen them where they were like, oh, you got to have your webcam on so we can see you at your desk.
Oh, yeah, no.
I'm like, okay, like we have jumped the shark on this whole thing. If you're looking at somebody's team status or at their webcam or whatever, like, you've missed the point.
Well, and if I have to look at that to determine whether you're a good employee, I'm a terrible manager.
Right.
I'm a terrible boss.
Either that, or you really are a terrible employee, and like
Yes.
that shouldn't be,
And you shouldn't be working there anyway.
right. It's one of those two things. So for people who are dealing with, or you're seeing people quiet quit, or like, how do you overcome it? We talk a little bit about employee engagement and those three things. And I honestly think eliminating those three is a great way to overcome it. Because employees who are engaged are not going to quiet quit.
No.
They're going to outright quit.
Yes.
And they're going to have courage. And because that's another whole thing here, is that it's a coward move. But the way that I know that I would come at it is, I'm hearing, well, you just need to pay them more. And I'm like, well, why not just hold them to a higher performance standard? Like, have you been really clear about what's expected from the job? Do they have like a top three? Like, these are the three things I need to make sure I do at all times? Or is it just kind of unclear and like, well, if we get to it, we get to it. And the reason they're able to quiet quit is because the standard's so low.
Yeah, and if they do have performance metrics, they're either not hitting them or they're just steady across the board.
Right. And they're not growing.
No, they're not growing at all. And that's a big deal too, because most people want growth.
Right. Well, and that's something as a manager, if you're seeing that and not addressing it, because I actually think this quiet quitting is not a symptom. I'll give you, it's some of the employee, but I will say it's mostly on the managers, right? It's because they haven't been very clear about that. They're not seeing the growth, and they're not having the hard conversations they need to either inspire that growth or inspire the individual to find something elsewhere.
Right.
Because that's really what it is you wouldn't be able to quiet quit if you had a really proactive manager. There just wouldn't be a way to do it.
No, because they'd be all over you to make sure that we're maximizing our time.
Yeah. And not micromanaging, like in a full-on accountability, like, let's talk about, like, they know you, they know your job, they know it's, what's stressing you out. Like, you wouldn't be able to hide behind just enough.
Yeah.
and they would care about you to the point that like you would feel guilty letting them down, right? Or you would feel guilty that you're milking it and you'd leave, because you're like, hey, I'm totally taking advantage of this person. I need to just go, right?
I can already hear there's going to be people that are going to try and be very counter to this opinion.
It's possible.
Right. Well, they'll just sit there and say, well, if they're getting their job done, why does it matter?
And that's true, right? Like then they haven't really quiet quit, have they?
No.
Right? If just enough is good enough, then what difference does it make, right?
Maybe your organization's standards aren't high enough,
and that's just it, right? Like if you have good performance and you're growing and you're pushing that, and people are quiet quitting, is very different than no, we're totally happy with status quo and nothing ever changes. Because then, like your people have been quiet quitting for years.
Oh yeah.
Like, and this is why it's not a new problem. So it really kind of does come down to your company culture and how you want to handle those things.
Yep.
But fun times. So setting performance standards, if you feel like people are quiet quitting, go through those, signs of employee misery and make sure that everybody does have a way to measure their job. They've got a way to measure their relevance. They know that they're relevant, that they're not anonymous. That you need to have those regular one-on-one cadences and find out what's important to them and what's going on in their life outside of the office walls.
Yeah. Well, engage with them.
Yeah.
And it's not just a one-on-one once a week or once every other week and I'm done talking to this person. Like you need to engage with your employees regularly.
Yeah.
To make sure that, they are fulfilled and they are satisfied.
Yeah. And how's it going today, right? Because on Monday it might be one thing and then Thursday it's something totally different. So I think it's interesting too, and maybe this is why we're seeing a little bit more of the quiet quitting, like why this has got a noun now associated with it. Was the impact of the Great Resignation, right? Like you saw this whole shift of employee power shift away from the employer back to the employee, right? And there's a pendulum. It's going to come back around. You're seeing all these layoffs happen in the tech space, so it's shifting already. But I wonder if people aren't willing to hold performance standards or hold higher standards or have those hard conversations because they're too worried about people quitting, and it's taking too long to get new people on board. So I'm curious, I think there is probably a subtle impact there of the Great Resignation, but I also know as a manager, I'm like, yeah, well, you just got to own it. And you can't use it as an excuse, get better.
Yeah. I look at it a different way too, when you relate it to the Great Resignation, because they said that 26% of the people that left a company regret leaving. So the quiet quitting is a way of them.
Right. I regret what I did. And so now I'm going to quiet quit because I don't want to look like a job hopper.
Right.
And that's a real prevalent thing for these people too, is, well, what's my appearance look like? And is it going to affect my ability to get another job in the future? And that's really interesting because I think probably early last year, when I saw the Great Resignation coming around and I saw the people making the jump, I think I haven't coined it. I'm like, just wait. There's going to be a second wave of this, and we're going to call it the Great Regret.
Yeah.
Right. And here we are. Right. And so it's kind of fun. And it's like, yep, there we go. I coined that term. Not that I'll ever get credit for that, but it's cool.
Well, you had all these companies that were getting this infusion of cash.
Oh, yeah. And now we could just hire all this talent.
Yeah. And so people are jumping from place to place, and now it's starting to reset itself. That cash is drying up. It's not as available as it was. So you're getting the layoffs, and now people are even scared because they see the layoffs. Okay, well, maybe I can't jump somewhere else.
Right.
So
now I'm just going to quiet quit and ride it out until I feel more stable.
Yeah.
Right. You go back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? And it's all about the food, water, safety, and they don't feel safe in that environment.
Right.
So
it's interesting.
It is. We're going to keep an eye on this one, but thanks for joining us today. As always, you can go send any questions, comments over to podcast@rtafleet.com. Look forward to seeing you guys out at the Fleet Success Summit in Las Vegas. That's March 21st, 22nd. And we've got some good speakers already that we're getting really close to lining up. I know Mike Pitcher's coming, Sam Bradford's coming back.
We've got two more that we're not ready to announce yet, but we've confirmed one of the two, which I'm really excited about because I know him personally.
Yeah, and I've heard great things about this guy as well. So I'm excited to announce him. And we're recruiting speakers right now for that event. That lineup is just going to get even stronger. And Sam and Mike were two of our best speakers at our last event.
Oh,
and so like that's the bar we're trying to clear is, all right, we need Sam and Mike to be our worst speakers at this next event.
And it was the first time I had heard Mike speak, and he was fantastic. You know, you have that, he's from Louisiana, so you got like all these great little phrases and things that come out. But Sam now I've heard speak 2 or 3 times, and I just tell you every time, it's just the guy's emotion.
Genuine.
And how genuine he is. He just delivers. It's great.
Yep. All right. Well, until next time, we'll see you later.
See ya.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Fleet Success Show. If you like the show, we'd appreciate your 5-star review. Be sure to subscribe anywhere you listen to podcasts and come hang out with us on social media at Fleet Success. See you next time.